1, 2. Check, check. 1, 2. Check, check. 1, 2.
Yeah, okay. Well, I told JR.
Yeah. Yep, got it. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, good morning. Thank you all so much for coming. Good morning again, everyone. Hello. And first, let me introduce myself. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Richard Garriott. I'm the current president of the Explorers Club. And we are incredibly honored to have all of you with us today for what we think of as an incredibly special and important ceremony. To give you a little context, this historical context, this club was formed 118 years ago in what I often describe as the heroic age of exploration, where people were literally risking and often losing life or limbs and teammates, on their pursuits to reach the extremes of the Earth. And fortunately, we're in a very different time today. Modern explorers, fortunately, aren't generally risking quite as extreme of conditions. We have much better safety nets, among other things, better gear to allow us to do this exploration. But I would actually argue that explorers today are actually needed much more than ever. I think all of us are well aware of the extraordinary challenges facing this planet. Everything from climate, energy, food security, and the list goes on and on. And it's only through understanding the planet on which we live that we will be able to protect and understand what to protect and understand how to protect those things we need. And so I think exploration is still extremely relevant. And what's important about a setup for today's ceremony is, 118 years ago, as was very common of its era, the people who were celebrated were often the white European male explorers who took the credit for the entirety of these major accomplishments. And I'm very proud, actually, to say that the Explorers Club was one of the very first major organizations to celebrate Matthew Henson alongside Admiral Perry for his amazing contributions to that accomplishment of reaching the North Pole. But today we're doing even better. Today we're going to be celebrating these 4 Inuit explorers who obviously were far more than essential. Clearly, this expedition could not possibly have happened without their participation in making this really incredible accomplishment. And to tell you a little bit more about it, I'd like to introduce another one of our board members, a member of our board of directors, Mr. J.R. Harris, who, by the way, we just heard from give a nice presentation about some of his personal exploration a couple nights ago. I'm now a huge J.R. fan, and I also think he's a little bit crazy. There are things he's done that I would absolutely never do in my life. But he also happens to be the head of our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee who organized this event today. So, J.R., if you would please tell us a little bit more.
Great, this is great. This is really great. Thank you all for coming here. First thing I want to do is on behalf of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, to thank you all for coming here and to welcome you here. We have some members of the DEI committee here right now, and I'd like to ask them to just stand up briefly, or everybody who's a DEI member, and I also want to give a very big shout out to Martin Nuia, who put in so much time and energy and effort to making this event happen. And even now he's helping people find their seat over here. So Martin, this is Martin right here. He's the guy who did so much work. Thanks a lot for doing that, Martin. Give my hand here. So it's really, I think appropriate for the Explorers Club, because our mission to make sure that exploration continues to be a big part of what we do here, and it's really great that we finally having a chance to induct these 4 Inuit hunters who were out there with Piri and Henson. So what I'd like to do here is, because it's more than just a name. These guys obviously couldn't have, Piri and Henson never would have made it if it wasn't for them. Piri got his recognition pretty quickly. Henson had to wait a little bit longer. But these other 4 guys, they never really got the attention and the recognition that they deserve. And so it's great that we finally have an opportunity to do that here. So who are these guys? Let me just briefly introduce them to you. On your far left corner here, his name was Okwia. He was about 18, 19, 20 years old, young, stocky, really hard worker, had a great attitude. And it's easy to see why Piri and Henson would want somebody like that on their team. Standing next to him is Uta. Now, Okwia, he was the youngest guy, and Uta, he was the oldest guy. He was about 30, mid-30s. He was married. He was considered among the Inuit as the best hunter, the most experienced guy. And he actually saved Matthew Henson's life. When Matthew Henson fell off the ice and into the water, he was able to pull him out and rescue him. Standing next to him is Matthew Henson, and so I'll just move straight from him on Matthew Henson's left. This is Igengwa. He was also in his mid-30s, also married. Good provider. Igengwa was actually Uta's brother. And he also was the guy who really kind of took care of Peary on that trip going north. And not only that, he was the guy who drove the sledge, which they call the Morris K. Jessup sledge, which is right over here. And so it's really kind of cool that, you know, the circle is finally closing where Igingwa and the sled that he used over 100 years ago are now being kind of mentioned in the same room and at the same time. And then finally, on the very end here, this is Siglu. They called him the old campaigner. He was with Peary for a number of years, and even on that 1906 mission that they went that really went not that well, went pretty badly. And when they got home, when they got back, and Peary was kind of discouraged, heading back home, and Siglu says to him, "Hey, listen, you know, if you get it together again and you want to try it, you come back here and we'll be with you and we will do it and we'll help you again." They came back and he was there and he did it. So it's the old campaigner. So these are the four, and I'm happy and proud to, on behalf of the DEI committee, to inaugurate the Society of Forgotten Explorers and to recognize the first four members, these gentlemen here. Now, back in 2009, on a cold February morning, there was an event right here in this room, in the Clark Room, honoring Matthew Henson on the 100th anniversary of their voyage north, and the Explorers Club republished their Henson's book, which was published by the Lions Press. On that occasion, I had the honor of being the keynote speaker, and so what I'd like to do now is to end my comments right here with the exact same words that I said 13 years ago to end my talk back then. And back then I said, in concluding these remarks about long overdue recognition, I think it's important to reiterate that Peary and Henson were not alone when they arrived at the top of the world in April of 1909. Their four Inuit companions also deserve recognition for the work they did and the suffering they endured to make that dash to the pole possible. Hopefully, there are now Inuit kids out there who will take pride in and be influenced by the brothers Uta and Igingwa, the sturdy Okuya, and the old campaigner Siglu. Here they are. Let's give them a round of applause, eh?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. Now I would like to offer the floor to Mr. Kenneth Hogue, head of representation of Greenland in the United States and Canada. Thank you.
Thank you. My few words will be on behalf of Naalakkersuisut, the government of Greenland. And thank you so much to the Explorers Club for recognizing these four brave men. Avanarshore, the area where they came from, has always been the gateway to Greenland, where migrants, new people from Canada, came into Greenland, into Kavigak. And Inuit has always been pioneers, showing the way for others by having the courage to explore new lands. The four Inuit, Uda, Ihiengwak, Shikuk, and Ukuyak, were examples of two true pioneers and very brave men, being the ones who safely guided Mr. Henson and Admiral Peary to the North Pole. I just have to look here what I wrote. Thereby the four Inuit the 4 Greenlanders and the 2 Americans were the first humans on the North Pole. Inuit, the people of Avanassuaq area, of the Avanassuaq district, is being admired in the rest of Greenland as brave people and talented hunters. Let me put it this way: we from South Greenland are proud to have Inuit as our fellow countrymen, our fellow Kavigak. But it has been a long way since 1909. Much has happened since then, this being good and bad. But the descendants of the Inuit hunters are embracing the world of today. For instance, one of my fellow diplomats and our main desk officer on security issues in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the government of Greenland, Mr. Hans Peter Kierkegaard's family on his mother's side, actually hails from the Qaanaaq area. Isn't that interesting? I mean, today we have moved so long. I mean, today we are having a descendant of Inuit people being the one who takes care of the dealings with Pentagon, between Pentagon and Greenland. So all in all, it's very much, very rightly, to honor the 4 heroes from Avanassuaq, Uta, Ihiengwa, Sihuk, and Ukkuya, as they were the first on the pole together with Henson and Perry. They were indeed great people, heroes, and their bravery and their determination in pursuing new lands continues to be an inspiration and a great point of pride for Greenland today. Thank you so much to the Explorers Club. Thank you so much for the recognition. As we say in Greenlandic. Thank you so much.
And Martin, I believe, are we to the 4 bells? Sure. Oh, no, I was actually told there was only one speaker. Sorry. Yeah.
So I'm going to ring the bell outside, which from the Coast Guard cutter Bear that rescued Adolphus Greeley. By the way, the painting in the library is also on his expedition, and he was also the first president of the Explorers Club. I will make sure to ring the bell loud enough so the ancestors can hear it.
And so if we can just have a moment of silence for the 4 bells. Thank you very much. And are you going to introduce the next remarks of our 4 guests? Great. Just make sure we're on the same page. These, right? Okay, perfect.
This is a very heartfelt moment for me. I always think I'm going to be good at this, and then this always happens. But I've been doing this research for about 20 years, and much of my work has been to try to give a voice to the Inuit throughout the Arctic. And so to see this moment happen in this room with these people is just great. And I want to introduce our speakers from Greenland, Navarana Kavigak Sorensen, who I have known for about that 20 years, a wonderful spirit that I met in Qaanaaq who helped me with my translation work, and she has helped so many people doing research in Greenland with their efforts. Her drum dance outside, I'm sure, was a good call to the ancestors, and she will be one of our speakers, and I'm going to introduce you first. If you can say a few words. Yeah, I put it down for you.
Oh, lift me up.
Yeah, no.
I'm not a great speaker, but I'm people call us a great Inukwak, but I don't call myself Inukwak. It's just I call myself Inuk. I'm not. I used to know Udak because he is my mother's uncle from her mother's side, and I used to warm my little hands on his neck when I was little, and I called him my grandfather, like we do in Greenland when our mother's siblings are just like uncles and aunts. We call them for our grandmother and grandfather, like our own grandmothers and grandfathers from our mom's and dad's side. Martin, he made this event very special. Thank you so much. And I'm very happy to be here. And I see all your beautiful, smiling faces, and I'm very honored to be here in behalf of Udak's children and grandchildren, and his great-grandchildren. They couldn't come, so I'm the only close to him here in this room, like a family, like as a family. So I'm very happy to be here, and sorry I'm not. I don't know what to say. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
And our next guest is Kavigak Hensen, great-granddaughter of Matthew Hensen. And again, wonderful that you can share in this room with the ice sledge that transported them, and with all friends and family here gathered to celebrate the good name of Matthew Hensen. Come on up if you want.
Hello. Hello. Wonderful. Let me take a picture of you. Okay, all right. Okay, let me try it again. Okay, can you please stand here so you can see like that? Thank you. All right. My name is Kavigak Hensen, and I am a great-granddaughter of Matthew Hensen. I am from Nuuk, and I am very glad to meet all of you who attend here. It meant a lot for me and for my father and our family in Greenland. This is a very great moment, and I am very honored to be invited here. Just not because of the name, but it's something that touches us, all of us. It's something. This, okay. It's huge. Okay. Well, I am a teacher, and I have 2 children, and I live in Nuuk, and my father, Vitus Hensen, is grandson of Matthew Hensen, and my grandfather, Kavigak Hensen. Well, okay. That's a lot. There's so much. I have prepared for a speech, but I didn't. I just made some notes, but it's long. I can remember back in 1987, when I was a child, when I found out that my father we're going to New York, America, and we were very excited. The travel was arranged by Dr. Alan Condra. He did a lot for us, and when I told my teacher in Nuke, there were like about 10,000 population back then, and she was like, she didn't believe me that my father and his family were going to New York in 1987. Didn't believe it. But after the news and all of it, it was wonderful. Now, in 2022, I'm here. I am almost same age as my father, and my daughter is 7 years old. I told her to tell her. I'm sorry, this is cute. I told her to tell her, Jesus. That this event is big, and in some way it touches all of us here. I have kind of count the books that were published in America about Matthew Henson. There were about like 25 books, but there were no translated. They were not translated in Greenlandic. So I am honored to be here because I want to publish a book. So my families and relatives could read in their own language about the four Inuits and Matthew Henson and Robert Peary. And you give me the courage to do that, all of you. So hopefully I will have a connection with some of you to keep giving me the courage to do that. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Our next speakers have also traveled a good distance to be here with you to express some of the historical context. They have also worked very closely with many of these relatives, both in scholarship and also in friendship. And I first want to welcome Susan Kaplan, Director of the Perry Macmillan Museum at Bowdoin College, to say a few words. And I didn't know if you want to speak with Jenny or whether you want to do it separately. Yep.
So first, I want to thank Martin for inviting Jenny Lemoyne and me to participate in this wonderful gathering. Also, I want to acknowledge that I'm speaking on lands of the Lenape, Native Americans who called this place home long before Westerners reached the New World. I wish to honor past and present Lenape and encourage you to learn more about the indigenous people who have lived on the lands where you work and places you call home. The question of who first reached the North Pole began immediately after Peary claimed this achievement and challenged Frederick Cook's North Pole claim. But the seeds of this controversy were planted before Peary's 1908-09 expedition had even left New York. when Peary and his financial backers learned that Frederick Cook was headed to the Arctic and certainly had the North Pole in his sights. The grounds on which the controversy about who reached the North Pole first has been argued over a long period of time, and the arguments have changed, reflecting the advancements of technology and the shifts in society's perspectives on race. Most recently, as you've heard here, Matthew Henson's name has been added to the roster of people who might have been the first to step on ice at the North Pole, and his strong relationships with the Inuit and contributions to the expedition have finally been recognized. However, the debt that Peary, Cook, and Henson owed to the Inuit has not been sufficiently acknowledged and understood, as we all know. Jenny and I have been studying Peary's expeditions for over 25 years. Combined, we've gone to many of the important places where his life story unfolded: his beloved home on Eagle Island, Etah, Battle Harbor, the edge of the Polar Sea, to name a few. And we've gone into many archives, both of institutions and in private hands. One of the most important characteristics about Peary to recognize is that he understood that he needed to rely on talented people such as Robert Bartlett, captain of the Roosevelt, George Wardwell, the unheralded chief engineer who kept the Roosevelt running on her maiden voyage even while the boilers exploded and the ship caught fire. But most important was Peary's recognition that many Inuit technologies and hunting and traveling strategies were far superior to anything the West had developed, from the fur clothing sewn by gifted Inuit women to the sledges that were lashed and not pegged together. Combining Western and Inuit technologies was key to his accomplishments, as was the integration of Inuit into his expeditions and the selection of Ukia, Oda, Igingwa, and Siglu, who helped him on the last leg of his journey, and without whom he would not have succeeded. Scholars have repeatedly failed to acknowledge the contribution of the Inuit, collectively or individually. Until recently, histories have rarely referred to Inuit by name, often treating them as part of the environmental backdrop. In our years of research on these expeditions, Jenny and I have endeavored to highlight the contributions of Inuit and other Inuit to exploration of the North, and to understand both the positive and the negative impacts of these expeditions on Indigenous communities. Jenny will tell you a little more about what we've learned, but I would like to end noting how pleased we are to be part of the explorers' recognition and celebration of these Inuit individuals and the accomplishments that they have made to the exploration and understanding of the Arctic. Thank you.
Next, to fill in part of that story, Genevieve Lemoyne, curator of the Perry Macmillan Museum.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin, for organizing this event, and thanks especially to Navarana and Kavigak and others who have traveled so far to help celebrate the true heroes of Arctic exploration. When you think of Peary's dash for the pole, what do you imagine? For most, perhaps not in this room, but for most, images of fur-clad men driving dog teams on the sea ice or photographed standing proudly at what they believed was the North Pole come to mind. If you're a student of Arctic exploration, as we've heard, you might even be able to name some of them. Peary identified the 5 who made it possible for him to reach the pole and who we celebrate here today: Ukea, Uta, Matthew Henson, Igingwa, and Siglu in that in that very photograph. These 5 men were the best of the 24 men who had started out on the sea ice 5 weeks before. They were the strongest, the most skilled dog sled drivers, even the best hunters, although there was no hunting to be done in the middle of the Arctic Ocean. Behind their success was a dense network of people, the financial backers of the Peary Arctic Club, founders of this very institution, the American men such as Donald Macmillan and Ross Marvin, who Peary hired to support his work, the Newfoundlanders who made up the crew of the Roosevelt, to name just a few. But perhaps most important, although among the least appreciated, are the 17 Inuit women who in the summer of 1908 uprooted their lives on the eastern shores of Smith Sound to travel over 350 miles or 550 kilometers north to spend a year at Floberg Beach on the bleak northeastern shores of Ellesmere Island. It was these women who sewed all the clothing the men wore while traveling, and without which they would not have survived. Women like Tukamek and Inuahu, who with their husbands Agingwa and Itukasuk introduced Macmillan to many important survival skills during a month-long stay in a snow house on the north shore of Ellesmere Island in November of 1908. Women like Ekariusak, who 15 years earlier had spent a year in the United States with Josephine Peary. Like Akatengwa, Atita, Kayungwa, Ivalu, Elnaya, and Inaluk, to name just a few. Their names rarely appear in published accounts of the expedition, and only occasionally in unpublished handwritten journals. When they are mentioned, they're more often simply the women, or sometimes someone's wife. But evidence of their vital contribution is everywhere. Most were there with their husbands, and many had children too, some even born at Floberg Beach. But the men were often away for weeks at a time, leaving the women to navigate the awkward and unfamiliar social spaces of the expedition ship, where white expedition members and sailors were at home, and English was the dominant language. Through the archaeological research that Susan and I have done at Floberg Beach, we've documented how these women turned to keeping their shore-based homes warm with smoky, smelly kerosene lamps instead of their preferred seal oil lamps for which there was not enough fuel. They cooked and ate unfamiliar food provided by Peary, as there was typically not enough country food to sustain them. And they were unable to visit or rely on help from their extended families and friends back home. But through it all, they made sure that everyone on the expedition, their husbands and children, as well as Peary's men, had well-fitting, warm, and durable clothing and footwear. Working for the expedition took its toll on these women, some of whom suffered from frightening episodes of temporary stress-induced dissociative states through that long winter. But eventually, the expedition ended and they returned home, reunited with friends and family, back to the familiar routines of everyday life in a more welcoming and bountiful landscape. I like to think that in addition to being happy, maybe relieved to be home, and perhaps proud to have the material goods they received in exchange for their work, they also had a sense of accomplishment. For although so often unacknowledged, their skills and knowledge were crucial to the success of the expedition, and they had demonstrated their own amazing strength, resilience, and courage. So along with the men, the Inuit men of the expedition, I encourage you all to celebrate their wives and sisters and children. Thank you.
I've known our next speaker for 40 years. Bill Fitzhugh. I remember walking into his office as a student when I was starting research at the Smithsonian. A warm, friendly, encouraging smile. He has kept the same demeanor throughout his tenure at the Smithsonian, which is a feat in and of itself, by the way. And he has always been a part of all things scholarship in the Arctic. Wanted to remind us all that in addition to this celebration, we are also celebrating the 100th anniversary of the 5th Thule expedition from Rasmussen. And Bill, with that, I'd like to introduce you for a few words.
My, I see why you wanted to take a picture of this crowd. This is a wonderful. Thank you, Martin. It does seem like a while that we've been working together. Martin's a research associate at the Smithsonian and was the prime instigator of our last big exhibit we did on the narwhal, which is well known to Greenland and many people in the Canadian Arctic. And that exhibit I would say Martin created 90% of that exhibit. But it's traveling now. You might see it going around the country in the next couple of years. I also want to mention Nancy Shorey, who's in the front row here. Nancy has been my supporter and helper in the Arctic Studies Center at this Natural History Museum for many years, and I'm glad that she could come up to New York. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of a background. I'm representing the Smithsonian here. We are not like Bowdoin or some other institutions that had a prime, role in the either the Perry expeditions or the Danish Thule expeditions. But after those exhibitions took place, we got involved with collecting in Greenland through Bartlett. I hadn't realized how much collections Robert Bartlett made for the Smithsonian in his many trips north. So we do have a lot of Greenlandic material, ethnographic materials from whalers and other explorers and expeditions from West Greenland, and not too many people know that because the collections have not been studied or exhibited per se. We had a few of them in the Narwhal show. So let's see. We supported, some of you may remember Naomi Uemora's trek to the pole. We were involved in providing his logistic support and technical equipment for his trip. I've mentioned Bartlett. I want to mention Will Richard, who has been working with me as a photographer in my expeditions to Labrador and the Lower North Shore. And Will, over the last 20 years, has become a kind of like a son of Umanak, Greenland, working with Anne Andreasen and Rene Christensen. And he's written a biography, which we published last year, and there are a few books over here we have on his biography. I just want to call out Will because he's made a huge contribution to the photography and the publications about that part of the world. I'm an associate professor at Dartmouth College, and Dartmouth has had a long history in the north, especially through Stephenson. And now there is a growing program at Dartmouth. It's mostly in the natural sciences, but there's a lot of exchanges between Greenland students and Dartmouth students back and forth, and some wonderful new research and connections that are taking place at Dartmouth as well. The fifth Thule expedition is, as Martin mentioned, is also in a centennial this year. And Igor Krupnik, my associate, now chairman of anthropology department, and Aaron Kroll from our Alaska office put together this wonderful volume. And we had Mari Kleist down to give a talk at the Smithsonian in our Tiger Birch series. And over the last couple of years, they put together a wonderful history, and it's particularly focused on the Inuit participants in the fifth Thule expedition. And this is if some of you are not aware of it, this is the huge expedition that Knud Rasmussen, the Danish explorer and folklorist, made across the Arctic, founding the ethnographic basis for just about everything we know about the Canadian Inuit, then traveled by dog sled with two Inuit companions to Alaska and even to Siberia. And on their way back, they stopped at the Smithsonian and provided us with pictures and information about this trip when they were returning to Denmark in 1924. So we've had a lot of connections with Greenland over the years, and I'm hoping that we find ways to continue those connections. And Martin's program here and the arrival of the Inuit from Greenland give me hope that we're going to have another phase of very different kind of exploration, but real participatory work in the future. So thank you all, and thank you, Martin.
Bill also is the founding director of the Arctic Study Center at the Smithsonian as well. As long as, Jenny, you so highlighted celebrating the women, I also wanted to recognize our first woman president of the Explorers Club, who I would gladly give a seat up to anytime, Fania Rose, who is sitting at the end. And now we'd like to do a little bit of a ceremony because we have installed 2 tiles with the names of the Inuit hunters, which you'll be able to see after this program on our terrace. One was a little obstructed because of the inclement weather that might have been predicted, so a tent post is over a little bit of one. But at this point, I wanted to invite Richard Garriott up and J.R. Harris, who is the brainchild of this whole thing to begin with. And we have some commemorative tiles that we wanted to present both to our consulate directors, if you would step up both as well, and Greenland, and also Navarana, if you're here, and Kavigak, if you're here. Great.
I'll hold your hand.
Okay. We'll show them to you first. They're all individually framed replicate tiles, so each of one could take a little bit of what we have home with you. So I'm going to pass it down to the women first.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you very much. And now if you want to join us all, we're going to head to the terrace. Navarana will do a small chant there and a ceremonial lighting of a soapstone lamp for those memories. We'll be going out the door here and then on to the terrace.